So I'm going to read you the Histories by Tacitus. This is book 5. This is when he talks about Titus Caesar conquering the Jews. But for about 4 pages, he gives you an entire history of the Jews that's completely contrary to what we know in the Bible. It says they're from Crete, whereas the Bible says Abraham's from Ur, Babylon. I don't know if Tacitus is right. He could be wrong. However, I think there's a lot of things in here that are right. So I think this is definitely worth knowing for if you're a historian. So here we go. It is said that the Jews are refugees from Crete, who settled in the furthest part of Libya at the time when Saturn was forcibly deposed by Jupiter. Evidence for this is sought in the name Judea, a famous mountain in Crete, inhabited by the Judea, whose name became lengthened in the foreign form Judae. Others say it is the name of Isis, the superfluous population of Egypt. Under the leadership of Hero Shlimash and Judah, discharged itself upon the neighboring districts, while there are many who think the Jews of Ethiopian stock, driven by their fear and hatred to emigrate in the reign of King Cepheus. Another tradition makes them Assyrian refugees, who, lacking lands of their own, occupied a district of Egypt, and later took to building cities of their own and tilling Hebrew territory and the frontier land of Syria. Yet another version assigns to the Jews an illustrious origin as the descendants of King Ptolemy, a tribe praised in the poems of Homer, who founded a city and called it Jerusalem, after their own name. Most authorities, however, agree that a foul and disfigured disease once broke out in Egypt, and that King Baccharis, on approaching the oracle of Ammon and inquiring for a remedy, was told to purge his kingdom and to transport all the victims into another country, for they had earned the disfavor of heaven. A motley crew was collected and abandoned in the desert, while the other outcasts lay idly lamenting. One of them, named Moses, advised them not to look for help to the gods or men, since both had deserted them, but to trust rather in themselves and accept as divine the guidance of the first being whose aid they should get out of their present plight. They agreed and set out blindly to march wherever chance might lead them. Their worst distress came from lack of water. When they were already at death's door and lying prostrate all over the plain, a drove of wild asses moved away from their pasture to a rock densely covered with trees. Guessing the truth from the grassy nature of the ground, Moses followed and disclosed some streams with an ample flow of water. This restored them, continuing their march for 6 successive days. On the 7th day, they routed the natives and gained possession of the country. There they concentrated their city and their temple. To ensure his future hold over the people, Moses introduced a new cult, which was the opposite of all the other religions. All that we would hold sacred, they hold profane, and they allowed practices which we hold abominate. They dedicated in the innermost part of the temple an image of the animal whose guidance had put an end to their wandering and thirst, the ass, after first killing a ram, apparently as an insult to Ammon. They also sacrificed bulls, because the Egyptians worshipped the bull Apis. Pigs are subject to leprosy, the foul plague which they too were infected, so they abstained from pork in memory of their misfortune. Their frequent fasts bear witness to the long famine they had once endured, and in token of their rushed meal, Jewish bread is made without leaven. They are said to have devoted the 7th day to rest because the day brought an end to their toils. Later, finding idleness alluring, they gave up 7th year as well to sloth. Others maintain they do this in honor of Saturn, because Saturn is the 7th planet, either because their religious practices are derived from the Judea, or supposed to have driven out when Saturn and became the ancestors of the Jewish people, or because of the 7 stars and Pleiades, which govern the lives of men, The star of Saturn moves in the topmost orbit and exercises the mightiest influence, and also because most of the heavenly bodies move round their courses in multiple of 7. Whatever their origin, these rites are sanctioned by their antiquity. Their other customs have perverted the abominable and owe their prevalence to their depravity. All the most worthless rascals, renouncing their national cults, started showering them with offerings and tribute. This is the one cause of Jewish prosperity. Another is that they obstinately loyal to each other and always ready to show compassion, whereas they feel nothing but hatred and enmity for the rest of the world. They separate themselves from others both in meals and in bed. Though immoderate in sexual indulgence, they refrain from intercourse with foreign women. Among themselves, anything is allowed. They have introduced circumcision to distinguish themselves from their other people. Those who are converted to their customs adopt the same practice, and the first lessons they learn are to despise the gods, to renounce their country, and regard parents, children, and brethren as worthless. However, they take steps to increase their numbers. They count it a crime even to kill any of their later-born children, and they believe that the souls of those who die in battle under execution are immortal. Thus they think much of having children and nothing of facing death. They prefer to bury and not to burn their dead. And this, as their concern for their belief is an underworld, they conform to the Egyptian custom. Their ideas of the divine are quite different. The Egyptians worship most of the gods as animals, or in shapes half animal, half human. The Jews acknowledge one God only, of whom they have a purely spiritual conception. They think it is impious to make images of a god in human shape or out of perishable materials. Their God is almighty and eternal, inimitable, and without end. They therefore set up no statues in their temples, nor even in their cities, refusing this homage to their kings and this honor to their Roman empires. However, the fact that their priests intoned the flute and cymbals and wore wreaths of ivy, and that of the golden vine was found in their temple when Titus sacked them, has led people to think that they worshipped Father Liber, the conqueror of the East, also known as Alexander the Great. But this is completely out of accord with their cult. Liber instituted joyous and cheerful rites. The Jewish ritual is preposterous and sordid. The country of the Jews is bounded by Arabia on the east, by Egypt on the south, and on the west by Phoenicia and the sea. On the Syrian frontier, they have a distant view towards the north. Physically, they are healthy and hardy. Rain is rare, the soil is fertile. Its products are one of the same kind as ours, with the addition of balsam and palms. Palm grows have height and beauty, and balsam is a mere shrub. When its branches are swollen with sap, one may open them with a sharp piece of stone or crockery, for the sap vessels shrink up with the touch of iron. The sap is used as medicine. Lebanon, their chief mountain, stands shaded in eternal snow, a strange phenomenon in such a burning climate. Here, too, the river Jordan has its source and comes pouring down, but does not emerge in the Mediterranean. It flows undiminished through the first lake, then to it like a sea, which poisons the local inhabitants. No wind can stir waves in it. No fish, no waterfowl can live in here. The sluggish water supports whatever is thrown into it, as if its surface was solid, while those who cannot swim float on it easily as if they can. This is the Dead Sea. Every year, at the same time, the lake yields ash pulp. As with other arts, it is experienced with shows how to collect it. In its natural state, it is black liquid. When congealed with a sprinkling of vinegar, it floats on the surface of water. The men who collect it then take it into their hands and haul it in the deck. Then, without further aid, it trickles into the loads of the boat until you cut it off with the stream. But this you cannot do with iron or brass. It is repelled only by blood or a garment stained with a woman's menstrual discharge. That is what the old authorities say. But those who know the district ever the floating blocks of asphalt are pushed and dragged to the shore by hand. The steam out of the earth and the heat of the sun dries them, and they are then split up with axes and wedges like logs on blocks of snow. Not far from this lake are plains which are once fertile and covered with large and populous cities. These plains were destroyed by lightning. Traces of the cities are said to be remained, and the ground, which looked like wild or artificially cultivated, are black and sterile and wither into the dust and ashes, whether when in leaf or flower, or when they have attained their full growth. Without denying that at some date famous cities that were burnt up by fire from heaven, I am yet to incline to think that it is the exhalation from the lake which infects the soil and poisons the surrounding atmosphere. The soil and climate being equally deleterious, the spring and autumn crops all rot away. The river Bellius also flows into the Jewish Sea. Round its mouth is a found peculiar kind of sand, which is mixed with soda and smelted into glass. Small though the beach is, its product is inexhaustible. The greater part of Judea is scattered with villages, but they also have towns. Jerusalem is the Jewish capital, containing the temple, which is enormously wealthy. At first, line of fortifications guarded the city. Then came the palace, and the inner defenses enclosed the temple. But none but a Jew was allowed as far as the doors. None but a priest, Levite, might cross the threshold. When the east was in the hands of the Assyrians, Medes, and Persians, they regarded the Jews as the meanest of their slaves. During the ascendancy, King Antiochus endeavored to abolish the superstitions and introduce Greek customs, but Arsaces at the moment rebelled, and the Parthian War prevented him from effecting any improvement in the character of the grim people. Then, when Macedon waned, as the Parthian power was not yet ripe and Rome was still far away, they took kings of their own. The mob was fickle and drove them out. However, they recovered their throne by force, banished their countrymen, sacked cities, slew brothers, wives, parents, and committed the usual royal crimes. But the kings fostered the Jewish superstition, since they strengthened their authority by assuming the priesthood. This was the Maccabees. Now, the rest of the story people know. This is when the Romans subdued them, and based on my title, that's a story for another day. The first thing I noticed about this story is in the beginning, when he talks about the Jews coming from Crete, he says that they left when Saturn disposed Jupiter forcibly. Now, for a secular story, that sounds a little ridiculous. However, with new findings by David Talbot and the Thunderbolts Project, we now know that there was an event in the sky in antiquity right around this time where David Talbot claims that in the sky at that time, Jupiter and Saturn were so close to the Earth that you can see them like the moon, that they were so large, and they stood there every night lined up like a ladder, and they called it the Stairway to Heaven. At the time, they thought these were gods. They thought that was it. They thought they were looking at heaven. They thought they were being ruled by this god. They called it Kronos. Well, it really was just Jupiter and Saturn. However, it did appear that Saturn forcibly disposed Jupiter and became the highest in the sky. This matches up perfectly with Tacitus' account of Saturn forcibly disposing Jupiter. I also thought it was pretty interesting how when they talks about the Jews leaving Egypt, the story matches up with the myth a little bit, except what they do is instead of Moses finding a burning bush in the desert, he finds a tree that was led by his stray ass that brought him there, the donkey. And they actually worship the idol of the donkey, the image of the donkey, for a little while until they must have decided that they were going to do away with it. But it even says that they did that at first. I thought that was pretty interesting, how you have like an account that explains away why they have a 7-day rest theory. They were stuck for 6 days, and the 7th day they found the water. It explains who these people are, in a secular way that makes sense. And it ties everything together. And, it's just interesting how this story is pretty in-depth, and it leads up to the Maccabees pretty nicely. It doesn't say anything about King David. However, there are some archaeologists now saying that King David might be a myth too. So, we don't know that. But they do mention Solomon. I think, in my personal opinion, everything before King Solomon probably is an allegory. I think King Solomon might be the first actual king of Israel, and all the kings after King Solomon are real kings too. But the reason why I think that is because if you look at the Bible, Kings 2 starts off with Solomon. I think Kings 2 is the actual real story of the real king. Chronicles, the book of Chronicles starts off with Solomon as well. King David has his own. King David's just in Samuel, and they kind of separate him. He's more of like the Messiah figure of the Old Testament. So it could be that David is a myth, Solomon's the real first king, and then everything after that is story with myth added onto it. That's my personal opinion. But this account definitely highlights all of that, especially with the pork thing. It makes sense that both the Jews and the Egyptians don't eat pork because they both had the same experience. So that makes sense. They both started at the same time and stopped eating pork at the same time. Alright everybody, that was Tacitus, the Histories. That is a early 2nd century book written by a Roman historian, Tacitus. That was book 5, and it was about history of the Jews. Thanks for watching.